So, Amber,
Yes, Marty.
tell me a story about what you're doing today.
Tell me a story about what I'm doing today. Ooh, now literally my brain is going, now what parts of my day do I want to talk about?
What parts of your day? We could change the podcast right now to what parts of your day do you want to talk about?
It's not that I wouldn't share it, but it's like, well, what will make for unique fodder for a podcast? Tonight is I will be teaching. So I teach in the summer semester. I'm just teaching one night a week. So I will be teaching this evening. And my classes right now, they're a 3-hour face-to-face or they're a virtual. So in the summer, I'm just doing a face-to-face. So I get to spend 3 hours in a, university classroom with chalkboards and whiteboards everywhere and rolling desks and chairs that you can reconfigure and, projection system to put my slides up on. And then it's just me and them, and we just hunker down and do the work. Yeah. And I enjoy those reads very much so. I enjoy I enjoy the engagement. That would be my favorite part. And I think I've long understood in my teaching that I'm less interested in teaching people what I know as to sharing with people what I have learned. And then if there's teaching that comes out of that for them, great. But also, what have they learned? So tell me about, like I find myself in the class that I'm teaching right now is in project management. So we have a case study and we have, leadership scenarios that we talk about, but then I will like literally mid-class, I'll be like, okay, so like, let's apply this to the local Walmart. And, in those moments, I can just see that people are kind of like, what? We're at Walmart now? And I'm like, okay, but let's make it like relatable to our daily life as opposed to the abstract. It's a case study. We're doing this big project. And what is the risk of a project like this? And I'm like, okay, what is the risk when you get in your car or get on the bus and decide to go to Walmart to buy 3 things on a list? Like, let's make it as realistic and tangible and relatable as that. I love moments like that. Mostly too, because I bring them up in the moment and I haven't even pre-thought them through. It's like I haven't even done a risk analysis on the trip to Walmart, and I'm using Walmart as an example. This could be any store, but I have been known to use the Walmart example. And yeah, I like those teachable moments because for me, I feel like I'm learning the most, and that's a super cool dynamic that I hope also translates to the people that I'm that are students in the class, which is, but we're all learning. It's a co-learning space. It's not a download.
That is amazing. And as usual, when asked to free flow, you end up hitting the exact topic that I was looking at, which is, and you and I have had this conversation a bit over the last while, and it's literally on the word leadership. That leadership has come to now mean so much that it's almost lost its identity inside that. And you were literally just talking about looking at leadership strategies for going to Walmart. So, because leadership is such a big word, maybe let's start with something as simple as, how do you define leadership when you're coming to a project space? Or any space for that matter.
Yeah. So I think the first word that comes to mind is service. And I think leadership and the evolution of leadership, I really feel leadership in the classic sense in the last 150 years in the North American mindset has come from a patriarchy, which I also have navigated and understood and been a part of my entire career. The good news is I think I wasn't aware I was in a patriarchy because I didn't define it as that until fairly recently in my career, where I recognized, I turn around and look at the culture around me and go, whoa, 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 whoa. How is it that I've actually had to navigate these spaces to be present, not just be present as a professional? Like, and I think that's what I've recognized about the structures and the power structures that we have in place. When we predispose that, for instance, in the case of the patriarchy, there is one gender that is more powerful than all the other genders. And I know most maybe think there's only one other gender. I would argue differently, but that's just my journey of understanding the spectrum of gender. But when we predispose and create an entire mentality, government structure, and organizational kind of governance approach to the fact that only one gender is most all knowing and powerful, it just subjects so much negativity on any other individual that sees himself in a different camp, in a different gender, or just in a different mentality. So for me, leadership has come from patriarchy, that definition in the world that I live in. And so I'm really at this stage of my career I'm trying to deconstruct it, to take it back to its truer kind of human sense, not a part of the cultural expectations of what it means to be a leader. And that's why service comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you take all of that away and you just think about human to human, irregardless of gender, of anything that makes those humans unique, you just say human to human, what is leadership? It's service, which means that if you're dealing with two humans, those two humans can lead each other because they can serve one another. And I think that service aspect is the part of leadership that I think is, in the world of testing everything and deciding what we're going to keep and what we're going to do away with. I want to do away with a lot of other definitions of leadership. And I want to keep that it is to be in service to others. And sometimes that looks like you're not at the front of the pack. You're not actually leading. You are ensuring everyone else is feeling empowered and inspired and healthy. And sometimes that looks like you're behind them all. But it is in that service.
So it's interesting because I love that word service. It's as someone who served in a service, a military service. That's a very important word to me because, of course, it's never about you. It's about the service. But service can look different ways, too. And I certainly you brought in patriarchy, which I always come back to a command and control system, right? We lead by telling, by direction. I'm going to command this. I'm going to control this. And what I heard you talk about very much sounded like a definition I would use of a coach approach. And a coach approach uses two different C's. Instead of using command and control, it's going to use collaboration and curiosity. That inside I can serve by commanding and telling you, and I can serve by asking and being open to.
I would agree. Service as a word definition doesn't paint the most accurate picture of what I was trying to get at. So you're right, because we can serve and still be controlling and manipulating. And I think that's not the version of service that I really am thinking in terms of how to define leadership. Oftentimes when I'm talking to someone who's, I would say, a disempowered professional, often a novice professional. Some of these are often my students. They're in career transition, or they're new to a career, or they don't have one yet, and they feel disempowered and they don't know what should I do. And you talk to them about leadership, and they're like, "I'm not a leader." To which I will make this joke: "Well, I saw two students walk behind you through the door into the classroom, so technically you led them in." To which, of course, immediately they're just like, "That's not leadership." To which I say, well, it depends on how you define it. To lead, by definition, can also just mean you're just literally a quarter step ahead. That's also a way to define leadership. And to be a quarter step ahead of someone can also serve them. You can be serving at guiding their way. That's simple. But, what do we mean in that sort of big, heavy picture of leadership? And it's multifaceted. But I do believe it has to be the future of leadership, particularly as we talk about, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, as well as living intelligence. We are going to have to think more consciously about how we lead as humans, because a lot of the systems around us are going to cease to be human. And although we invented them, they are going to out service us and outpower us in some ways. And how is that going to make us feel? In reality, that's why I think we need to focus really on what it means to be human, what the human experience is. And I think in serving one another, not necessarily in command and control, but in that collaboration and curiosity, it is how do we broker each other and our gifts and skills? How do we show up and, be our genuine selves with all the funkiness? Because I'm as funky as any human gets when it comes to my emotions and my beliefs and my confusion, my lack of awareness, my blind spots. There's still so much of that going on with me, and at the same time, I'm trying to work on those areas while I also gain perspective, more awareness, more openness. For me, a big piece of this as a leader was just accepting that I didn't know,
Mm.
that I lacked certainty. And I've talked about this before in podcasts. Like, I did an entire year of focusing on uncertainty, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. And then it became really comfortable to the point now where I don't define things the same way that others do, because I just have worked so hard to really let go of certainty and to be okay with the lack of it. Um, because I was raised in a very polarized black and white thing. A lot of the business, a lot of the project leadership that I had done in my lifetime, very black and white, very polarized. And when I think of the damage that I am guilty of having done in relationships, that wasn't leadership. That was mass manipulation. And it wasn't done, I would say, maliciously. It's certainly not my intention, but that doesn't mean that I'm not responsible for how my actions made individuals feel. And taking responsibility for that, looking at that, and then recognizing, whoa, that I need to grow and learn and change.
So I absolutely love that. Having known you now for about 15 years, maybe this is a way we could ask the question: if you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself 20 years ago, what are some of the things you might want to pass backwards to Amber of 20 years ago?
I literally feel tears coming to my eyes because I'm a parent first and foremost, beyond any other role that I had. And as a parent, I was um, 15 years ago, I had a newborn and a 4.5 year old. And if I could go back and tell that person anything, it would be that I was worthy of every good and wonderful thing right then. That there was no achievement needed for me to be an excellent parent, to be an excellent partner, to be an excellent professional. I like intrinsically had so much worth and value. I could have just rested and relaxed in the circumstance of what it meant to actually have a newborn and a 4.5 year old, move to a brand new city, do all of these massive changes in my life. That was a very dark time for me. And I fell into the deepest, darkest depression that I ever experienced on this planet. And it was a very, very difficult time for me. And I recognize now I lacked worth. I didn't lack it. I had it. I didn't. I felt separated from it. And as a result, it left me distracted in my ability to parent in a beautiful, edifying way. I lacked the ability to show up and be present with my partner in a way that was transparent. I arguably, and we will definitely put a warning on this podcast because I recognize the subject matter is intense, but in my deepest, darkest depression, my partner didn't even know. That was how much I worked to mask and pretend and act healthy and well when I wasn't. So if I could go give advice to that version of me, it would have been, yeah, let's focus on there's nothing you're gonna do here that's gonna create more worthiness of your existence on this planet. It's intrinsic. You have it. So it's okay. I was very much in the black and white binary belief about good and bad back then. And as a result, I didn't let myself off any hook. And I didn't let the people in my life off the hooks either. And it created this absolutely horrifying, toxic to myself cycle. And I hurt a lot of people at the time because I was completely lacking in self-awareness that that's what I was doing. And I also didn't know how to ask for help. So I would say if I could go back, yeah, ask for help. Um, and and ask for the help of finding ways to be reminded of your worth. Because I didn't have it then.
So first, let me say thank you for sharing. And certainly when we ask questions about leadership, sometimes we think we're talking about governance in groups,
Mhm.
but family is the closest group that we lead. And thank you for your sharing, because in that sharing is some pretty valuable material, because you had to go through a journey in those 20 years in order to come to some of the conclusions that you've come to today. So, if you're open to it, I would invite you to maybe talk to a listener who's saying, "Hey, I see binary and I see closed and I see lack of worth." Maybe what were some of the key elements of your journey that they might take some guidance from? So, I'm not asking you to guide them. I'm asking if you're open to sharing how you learned.
Huh. Well, I was incredibly stubborn. I shouldn't say I was. I am incredibly stubborn. So in my stubbornness, I unfortunately found myself having to exist in really tough circumstances to reflect back to me some of this. Um, as a coach today, that's what I would hope to do. You know, being coached or having someone in your life that can mentor or coach you, the hope would be that you would have someone be able to see some of those things in you and just simply mirror them back to you and say, hey, are you self aware that when you say this, when you act this way, this is what I'm hearing? This is what this is what you're telling me you're feeling. And is that working for you? I didn't have any of that. Um, and I think that's where I say, get help, ask for help, because I was incapable of asking for help back then. And I was closed to it and I hid it all. And we all still do this. I think, certainly we're getting better at it because I think we're talking about it. That's why I'm talking right now. You know, me talking about this in an open forum like this and being vulnerable, the goal here is not anything else other than let's stop continuing to stigmatize this conversation. Because um, 20 years ago, you were in a very difficult place too. And how often does that come up? How often do you have the opportunity to share that with others? Maybe you do, and that's great. But anyone listening to this 20 years ago, where were you at? We were all in struggles. But 20 years ago, did we talk about it? Did we share it? Do we ask for help in the same way that we might be more able to now? Not necessarily, because our culture has shifted. And I mean, I'm definitely speaking from a North American mindset, but even how I've raised those same children that were newborn and 4.5 years old. Now, fast forward, they're now 20 and 25, and they don't experience this the same way that I did because they were raised to talk about it and to openly engage it. And that changes. So I think having that openness is important. And how do you have openness? I mean, it's not there's no like magic. You just tell somebody how you're feeling. You just say it. That's it. And I know from my partner, perfect example. My partner is always, if you tell them, they're going to try to fix it. So I had to get better at saying, I'm just telling you, no action required on your part. Because that was really difficult because they also were raised in a patriarchy and their role within that patriarchy was to be a patriarch. And that's been really difficult for them because their heart now doesn't resonate with that same kind of command and control structure, probably never did. But they were the right gender and they had the privilege and they just they were reared up into it. So now it's this, how do we share and ask for help from one another? 20 years ago, we couldn't do that. Today, we do it better. And that's why we also, as professionals, I know this is a feisty project podcast. We're supposed to talk about projects. This is a project. This is my life. My life is a project. My career, my profession, my journey, yours too, Martin. This is completely related. And the idea of how we embody leadership, leaders have to recognize that the most powerful way to lead is to lead with authenticity. And to be authentic means to talk about these things and to make them normalized because they are normal because everyone experiences emotions, highs, lows, and everything in between. I mean, I could reflect this whole thing back on you and go, okay, well, 20 years ago, where you were at, what would you want to tell yourself?
Oh,
What lesson would you
yeah.
want?
Um, Again, I want to answer that question, but I really want to, because you just brought two things up, and I just want to make sure I point them out real quick. Which is, you talked about um, the fact that you got feedback and that someone was there, a coach was there to point out the blind spot and the feedback. And so when people ask me what's the benefit of coaching, I always come back to seeing seeing the blind spots, because you don't know what you don't know. The feedback, because the feedback now gives you an awareness, and that awareness can now help you plot a destination. Where do you want to go now that you know that? That's, to me, that's coaching in a nutshell. So in terms of professionalism, yeah, we've hit the absolute key components for what's needed for that. 20 years ago, I would have been between my first and second combat tour. 20 years ago, I had just started dating someone who I'd known for several years, and we were engaged. So suddenly I went from being a bachelor to having a 3 and a 5-year-old, and I became insta dad. Um, and certainly command and control. And so if I were to go back at that person knew he was struggling between two very big dichotomies of leadership. And I know, yeah, '05 was a year where I had to make a decision. Am I continuing on in a military path to go down this route where I became exceptionally good in my career, or family man? Or is there some sort of hybrid? Because when I first started, I thought it was A or B. Yeah. I was very much black and white, very binary. I can either be a family man and we stop this military thing, or I can be a military person and I become the best soldier a soldier can be. Um, I would discover over the next years there is a hybrid.
Yeah.
And certainly that's what I would just simply say: be open. Be open to the me of that time, that there's an iteration that isn't binary. And if you can see non-binary, and if you can see variation,
Right.
it'll be easier for you going forward. Because I don't think I really got to see the value of that until after a second combat tour. When I had a second combat tour, I had an awareness of leadership that was different, that was no longer binary like that, because I got to see so many different variations. And so here we are talking about leadership, and we're talking about who we were 20 years ago. So maybe to finish it off, what's a piece of leadership lesson that you've learned in the last while that's really a valuable piece that you think you carry with you going forward as a leader?
It's a strong question. And also a question that I think, depending on the day and the time you ask me, it's going to be a different answer. I think today, because in this conversation, the immediate word that came to mind was service. I think it is in service to myself, because so much of my leadership journey, you know, arguably some would say I'm that person in the room who's always the leader because of the nature of my personality. What I can say is that that may have been true at a lot of rooms in the past, but my relationship to that person has changed dramatically in my knowledge of self. So the self-awareness piece for me has been huge. I don't feel like I understood leadership 20 years ago. Arguably 20 years ago, I was not in a position of strength at all, in feeling so worthless. And my self-awareness journey has been the major change. The idea that that I had this intrinsic worth that I always had, but I just didn't understand that I had, and that focusing on that and reflecting on that and holding to that was actually a power that I had. It immediately made me less need to be right all the time. And I think for me, I will say probably the most powerful journey in leadership I've had in 20 years is I have let go of needing to be right in the moment And I have practiced saying I'm sorry and meaning it. And I think for me, what's happened is that there are a lot of times people come at me and say they're upset with me or I've done something, it's made them feel something. And I have completely stopped the need to reflect to them that they're wrong, that I didn't mean it that way, and that they've misinterpreted. I just let that go. And now my immediate response when someone comes at me and tells me something negative is, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I needed that feedback and I'm so sorry. And then I hold the silence. And in that silence, what I recognize has happened for me is that I have learned that my relegated ego is more powerful than my non-relegated ego. And also in that moment, I mean that I am sorry to that person. And that space of silence after allows them to actually absorb the apology and feel it. It's heartfelt. It comes from a place of, I am sorry. And I'm not defining why I'm sorry. Sometimes they may have completely misinterpreted what I said and they got it all wrong. And I'm
Right.
kind of frustrated. But the practice of like, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry. In that moment, I could be apologizing because I'm sorry we're here. I'm sorry this happened. I don't have to be saying I'm sorry I ever said that or I didn't mean it because I may have meant it. But in those moments, I don't have to be right anymore. And that has completely transformed my definition of leadership because that's how I can serve those moments and serve those moments authentically and honestly, but also with the opportunity for me to grow and change, not to expect anyone else around me to have to grow and change for me, because I can't change anybody. I can only change myself. So that is what I would encourage the journey for others to do, which is this idea of how can you hold yourself and your self-awareness such that you can let those moments pass that can be really difficult and hold yourself, recognizing that it is an opportunity for you to learn more about you. And yeah, I have changed.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing. That's a lot of material today. What I heard in that last sentence was that there is a duty of service leadership to create psychological safety and safe spaces for those in our care. And thank you for your vulnerable sharing that got us to that space. And thank you for your leadership going forward.
Thank you for asking the question.